tired of hitting poor shots and shooting high scores? Wouldn't it be nice to make solid, consistent contact more often? Hit more fairways off the tee and more greens with your approach shots. Lower your 3 putts per round and shoot lower scores consistently. Lessons with Bernard Sheridan at Impact Zone Golf at Tiburon Golf Club in Naples is the fastest way to lower your scores and start making the game fun again. Call 239-236-5536 and schedule your lesson today. Remember, if you improve your impact, you improve your game. It's that simple.
So Wayne, thanks for being on Breaking Par. Appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today. And we're really looking forward to having the audience learn from your expertise. So
Great.
As we get started, tell us first, when was the first time you picked up a golf club?
My dad introduced me. We had a couple of books in the house. He was a beginner, more or less, when I was an infant. So by the time I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, he was down to maybe a 10, 12 handicap. But he was real interested. He was an engineer, worked with defense intelligence as a cryptographer and some. He's a mathematician type of a guy, analytical. So he had a copy of Hogan's 5 Lessons, and I remember he had a big Kerry Middlecoff, had a Swing the Club book, and we go out in the backyard and we'd hit wiffle balls. It's a lot smaller than I thought it was at that point, but he just gave me some basics, and by the time I was 12, I showed a little promise, so we entered into a tournament, and I liked what happened. I won a trophy, and then when I was 13, I was winning a bunch of tournaments in the D.C. area. We had a nice junior program. There was a great guy, Frank Emmett, one of the great guys in golf, that ran the junior program in the Washington area, and we had a tournament almost every week. So great competition, and growing up, that's pretty much what I did up until I was 17 and went off to college.
And did you play golf in college also?
I was recruited to a couple of schools. I played pretty good when I was 17, but I was young for when I was, as far as college was going to be. The year I played well, the schools had already picked their rosters, sort of. So I qualified. I was going to go to the University of Virginia. I qualified for the U.S. Amateur, which was in Richmond in 1975, and I got a call from Jesse Haddock at Wake Forest, and he had a spot open on the squad for one more recruit, and asked me if I wanted to go to Wake Forest. And of course, that was the team with Curtis Strange and Jay Haas, Bob Byman. They had 4 All-Americans, and they had just won 2 straight national championships. So I said, absolutely, I'm in. Let's go. So I ended up at Wake Forest, and I played there 2 years. We had an unfortunate coaching change, and I transferred to LSU, sat out a year, and then my junior year suddenly had a tremendous year and made first-team All-American that year.
That's awesome. That's an awesome story. Now, when did you decide to get into it as a profession?
Well, I had an interesting up and down because of injuries. I kind of lost my game my senior year in college, so after that I decided not to play golf professionally. The only job I could get was at a golf store, one of the big box stores. They had just started up. There was a chain in my area that I worked at, and they had a simulator. This is way back in 1980, and I started hitting balls into the simulator. And of course, we had a little book rack with books, and there's Hogan's book again, haunting me. So I started working on my swing and hitting into the net, and I entered a few tournaments that year, and I qualified for the U.S. Open as an amateur. In 1981, played at Marion, missed the cut by 3, I think, and I won the area, the district amateur. I won the tournament, and I decided I would turn pro, and I took my first wife down to Orlando, and we moved down there, and I played the mini tour for 5 years until I had my second back surgery, and that was the end of that. And I ended up deciding that I needed to make a living, and I love golf, so I started to teach.
And where are you teaching right now?
Right now I'm in Rockville, Maryland, at a nice course, Lakewood Country Club. I spent 3 seasons up in Long Island, New York, my first job in the mid-'80s and late '80s. And then I had another surgery, back surgery. I've had 4. So I got out of it for a year, tried to get into real estate. Of course, the real estate market crashed, which is to my benefit now that I look back on it. And then I ended up getting a job at Woodhome Country Club in Baltimore, which is a wonderful course. An old Herbert Strong architect, a Scottish architect from the 20s. Great place. And I worked there 15 years and taught. And then I went to Woodmont Country Club down in Rockville, and now I'm at Lakewood.
Nice, nice. So I know that that you do some videos on YouTube, and you basically will take certain golf professionals and break their swing down. And so give us a little bit of insight to the audience of what are some of the things that you like to see in a golf swing.
So when I teach, and I was teaching before we had V1 and we were able to use the software to draw the lines and stuff, I would use a TV and take a dry erase marker, and I would always use a tripod, and I had my whatever the camera of the day was, the mini DV or the 8mm, and I would draw an outline of the entire body on the screen, and then I would watch the swing. I saw an article many years ago, back in the 70s, where the Golf Digest or magazine, one or the other, they had Tom Weiskopf, and they were doing a swing study on him, and they drew lines, they drew a box around certain parts of him just to show where he was when he started his swing, and then when he swung, it was all sequence photos, but you could see if he moved a little bit, if his hips moved a little right, if his head moved. And it was interesting because they were really focused on, whether his head was moving or this and that. But I looked at that and I'm like, that showed me something. It's like, if you can see where you start and then where it moves, where you go, there's a whole lot of information there. When you watch a swing at regular speed, and you can watch it a million times, you cannot pick out the subtle movements in time. So you don't know when things are happening. You don't know what's causing what. I mean, there's a lot of guesswork even when you talk about what is causing something to happen eventually. But if you can mark the initials, and if you go to any scientific experiment, you always begin with the initial conditions. So you have to mark down where you start, because anything after that is what is changing. So if you're going to talk about what's going on, it's going to be about what's moving, when and where, and how much. So that's what I started to do when I was able to get the V1, which made it a lot easier, is I just draw a few lines and I mark, like from down the line, I'll put a line on the back of the butt, down to the ground, and in front of the knees, top of the head, and on the shaft. and then I'll just watch the swing function and see where it goes. Does it progress upward? Does it suck inside? Does the head go forward and back? Does the player stand up, lower down, back up? And if you look at it face on, I'll draw lines on each side of the hips, each side of the head, on top of the head, and straight up from the ball. And then you can see lateral movement, you can see up and down movement, you can see where the hands are. So when you go to the Mac O'Grady's P system, P1, P2, P3, so at all those points in the swing, the lines are still there from where you started, so you can see what movement happened, how much, and at which point in the swing the movement started to happen or stopped happening. So I just found that when I'm teaching someone, that if I film the swing from front and back, and I'll usually do a regular speed and a slow-mo, and then when I draw the lines and I watch it, I usually don't say anything for a couple of minutes because it's really difficult to decide, A, what's happening, B, what's happening at which point in the swing. So, in other words, how am I going to progress? What's the most important thing to pick out as I'm watching these swings unfold? And then as I've usually asked the students some questions about their background and what have you been working on, what have you worked on in the past? What do you think is your issues that you would like to get better at? What do you think your swing might be doing? What kind of shots do you hit? Where are your misses? You give that little interview that all good teachers will give. So I get a little information about the student, and then as I'm watching their swing, I'm processing constantly, relative to what they thought they might be doing, what's actually happening. So they're watching along with me. I'm not saying anything yet. And then I pretty much will decide, okay, here's where we're going to start, and this is how we're going to try to progress. So some players will like an overview. They like a lot of information at the beginning, what's going on here. And then some players don't want that at all. They're like, why do I do that? Let's just do that. Let's fix that. So once you get an idea it's really important to get an idea of what the student might like to get out of the lesson, and how do they learn. Do you like watching this stuff? You want me to move you around, look in the mirror? And that's all happening in the first 5-10 minutes of the lesson. So when you get really good at that, you've got the rest of the hour to really apply what you're thinking to drills and trying to get them to feel a movement, and see at the end of the lesson, if you film again or in the middle of the lesson, are you getting change? Are you getting some progress in the swing, rather than just sort of watching it and saying, oh yeah, that was better because the ball flew better. So I'm really watching. I don't use a lot of high tech.
Okay.
We have a TrackMan at the club. I tend not to use it in the lessons. I think visually, most people need body mechanics and motion, and when you throw all those numbers in there, it might tell me something. But after doing this for 30 years, you get pretty good at. You could probably pick out TrackMan numbers. There's no big surprises. When you watch a swing and slow it down and watch it in detail, you're not going to get too many surprising things from TrackMan.
Do you use any other technology other than TrackMan at all?
No, I like swing aids. I like the simple ones, the ones that kind of fit in your bag.
Sure.
But most swing aids are designed for a specific issue. They're not universal. So I've never been one, and I have never, with 2 kids in college, I've never been able to afford some of these things that
I know the
guys
feeling.
guys are, gears, swing catalyst. I like force plate technology. I don't have one, but I think that's pretty cool. All this stuff is nice. The bells and the whistles tend to attract a certain type of player. They like to have, they just think that's, an indication that the teacher's got something going on, that they can tell them something that's going to make it easy for them. But of course, that's not true. There's nothing easy about changing a golf swing or making it better.
No, with technology or not, that's true. I mean, you have to find out what the issue is, and then kind of work backwards from that to get them to where they need to be. So, when you're, are there, like, I know that with us, because I'm at Impact Zone Golf, we have like specific things that we always are looking for, that we know that if they produce those things, that they're gonna be exponentially better. Are there any little things like that you see that because in other words, like one would be, and you mentioned, drawing a line behind their tail, and then if their tail comes off of that quickly, that's something that we look at, because now they're having an early postural release. I know that you mentioned that. Are there any other things that you really are looking for specifically, that you can that you're trying to change on a player right away?
Well, if you or it depends on who you're teaching. If you're teaching someone who's always already very good, you probably are going to have less tendency to try to conventionalize their backswing. So you get somebody like Daniel Berger, what are you going to fix the guy's backswing? Probably not. Now, the guy hits it good. I mean, if he's got any sort of problems, it's with the way the club's approaching, where's the face, stuff like that. But normal people, I mean, talking about the average guy, they're going to have a much easier time if they get the swing closer to the plane. Like a backswing that starts, the good setup posture, all the what people call fundamentals. It really is just get out of your own way at the beginning, get your grip decent, set up balanced and athletic, and get some space. And when you take the club away, if there's anything funky about it and you're not that great, you're going to be better off if you can get the club moving back, get the big muscles moving, get the club up on plane, get some width, and it just makes it a ton easier to start talking about the hard part of the swing, which is transition to impact. The backswing and the setup are not the hardest things. They may be hard to fix. Trigger movements are very difficult to change, especially amongst people that play a lot. Because when they have some funky, kick in the knee, back their head up and pull the club back thing going on, quieting that all down and getting them to do that and do it on the course is very difficult. But those are all worthwhile things to get the swing started correctly, and then pretty much just explaining how impact works. I'm a drive hold kind of guy. I really don't like flip release. So, everything that I do is really designed to get the hands to approach far enough ahead so that the shaft will have some forward lean with an iron shot, especially a short game. And then with the driver, definitely trying to explain how the hand path is different, how impact is different, and your intent as you hit the ball is also different. So it's not the same swing all the time. So good players just naturally hit a driver like a driver and an iron like an iron. But when you get the people you're trying to get to improve, normally they'll hit one better than the other and not really understand why, or why that might switch back and forth, because they don't really get. So you're explaining conceptually things as you focus on the specific, technique items. So I try to educate people about how the swing works. I like doing that. I think that eventually your goal is to get people to be able to self-correct somewhat, so they don't need to have eyes on them all the time. They don't need to be asking They should have a feeling for, okay, this is what my swing almost always does when I don't hit it good. This is what I should probably be trying to think about to make it better right now on the course, like the next shot. What am I going to do? So people, instead of getting lost after they hit a couple of bad shots, I lost my swing. You know, you didn't lose your swing. You just got to learn how do you focus on what you know. What have you learned about your swing? What have you learned about the swing in general so that you can put some decent thoughts in your head? And because you have to think, you can't get away with that. I mean, there's no such thing as not thinking.
Oh no, I totally agree with that. There's definitely has to be some thinking there. That's for sure. To not think at all. I mean, you got to work your way around the golf course. You got to know what you want the shot you want to produce before you hit it, and you have to feel what it's like to produce it before you hit it, or at least have a sense of that you think you know what you need to do.
Right, that makes a big difference. If you have to have some confidence in what's going through your head in order to make a positive move, and trust it to a degree. You know, even if you're not that good and you know a lot of shots don't go off the way you want them to, you still have to focus on the target, look at the fairway, and make your swing. You gotta believe the ball's gonna. You got to see it go where you want it to go. Then when it doesn't, there's nothing you can do about it. So you just go get it and then start over again. And that's what you have to do for 18 holes. So, you know, I never saw myself being a teaching pro. I was just wanted to be a player. So that didn't happen, as it doesn't happen for, you know, many thousands of players. But I always had a real interest in how the swing was working. I pretty much had to reconstruct my swing. I had as a lot of guys did back in the 70s and 80s, modeled their swings after, you know, Miller, Watson, Nicklaus. So a lot of reverse C, which was actually taught back then, unfortunately. So a lot of bending, upright, head behind the ball, knees to the target, all that kind of good stuff. I was good doing that, but it destroyed my lower spine. So, you know, after a fusion and, you know, 4 surgeries, after the first surgery, I really had to learn how to get my swing more rotary. I couldn't swing that vertical hang back swing anymore. So I had to retrain myself to have a flatter move, and I had to finish more with less strain in my lower back.
Sure, more around your body than more upright coming out.
Which is one of the things that brought me back to Hogan when I was a kid. I was pretty much enamored of Hogan and the book, and then sort of got away from that, and then I just had to go back, and that became my dictionary sort of. For the swing, not everything about Hogan's book. I didn't really use the grip the way he described it. I'll go back to Power Golf, actually, for the grip and the swing itself. Some of the things in the book are really explained very nicely, but there's a few things in there that I found to be, and have found lately, you know, later on in my teaching career, to be very detrimental to people. You know, Hogan wrote that book based on how he felt like he would teach a beginner.
Right.
So when you look at his arms tied up at address, you know, I always show people, you know, when I suggest to people that they have their arms bent at address, and they say, well, you're a Hogan guy, what about the book? I said, well, you don't really want to don't look at the book. Those are drawings. I said, come here, I'll show you. I got 100. I got every Hogan swing that you can find. I'm sure there's more, but every one of them, his arms are bent at address. like he's holding a beach ball.
Right.
So I said, look, here's the picture in the book. Here's Hogan actually hitting a ball. Which one do you want to, which one do you want to bank on there? I'd rather do what he was doing myself. So I love watching his swing, and I try to compare it to what I'm doing or trying to do still with my swing, and I think that's just fun. So I use the principles that I get from his books, but really from watching his swing and the swings of all the good players, because I do the swing analysis when I get good video shots of all these different players, and you can pretty much put them side by side and compare them if you want to and see what the commonalities are. There's a few that just about every player is demonstrating. That's really good. Like you were talking about hip depth. Very important.
Yeah.
You really see probably the biggest difference between the haves and the have-nots is the pivot movement. And the pivot movement, it allows for the better impact. You can learn impact if your body permits it. If you move wrong and you get in your own way, and there's not a whole lot of hope that you're going to save it. There's not too many Raymond Floyds and Jim Furyk's, that kind of talent that puts the club on the ball and takes it back any old way. You don't find that very often. And when you're teaching, I've taught tour level players and beginners. So you can see that it's a whole different ball game. If you have to teach somebody that doesn't have the athletic ability and doesn't really have the knack to put the club on the ball, and then you find somebody that's already really good and is trying to find those couple of shots to hit the ball a little better and be more consistent and, make their way up to the top of the heap.
Now, do you ever relate the golf swing with some of your students to other sports?
All the time, especially, I think probably the main concept in Hogan's book is when he described the golf swing in general as a half sidearm, half underhand throwing motion. So, unfortunately, not everybody can throw sidearm. And if you're left-handed playing right-handed, you probably really can't throw sidearm from the wrong side. So, but if you can learn the movement, the body movement in a sidearm throw is such that you have to be able to get your upper arm in front of you. And that means that you have to be bent over. And that means you have to be shifting pressure from right to left if you're going right-handed, and you have to be rotating open. Usually you would take a big step and then get your arm in front of you and fire the ball. So that kind of sequencing and that kind of body motion is foreign to most people who aren't very good at golf. So when you show them that, a lot of times it really makes sense, and they can use that as a very, very simple thought that athletically suggests something that's fairly natural. They just may never have thought that the golf swing was like that. Like, never thought of that, never compared it to that type of throw. So people will throw sidearm, and they'll throw it chest high, and then they'll throw underhand, and they'll throw it with their palm facing the target. And I said, now try to throw sidearm with your hands passing below knee level. And that's a whole nother ball game. So if you're throwing sidearm with your hand passing by where they started at address, close to the shaft plane, then you've got to do some things in transition to get your right arm in position, and that's a difficult thing. So the misuse of the right arm, I find, is probably the biggest issue with average golfers. Overturning the right shoulder, getting the right arm behind, trying to make a bigger swing, not understanding what has to happen with the sidearm movement in transition, where the upper arm has to drive inward, and it can't stay up, it can't stay back, the forearm can't tip over. All those things are athletic, but they require pivot movement to make them possible. So getting people to do this requires, for me, a lot of hands-on. So I'm a real mover, puller, pusher when I teach. So to me, it's very physical. It's a hugely physical game. I mean, it's obviously cerebral in a sense. Theoretically, you can explain the swing and take hours upon hours to talk about how swings work. But in real life, when people talk about what does that feel like, you can't sit in a chair and get someone to feel something. You got to get up and you got to hold them. You got to grab them. You got to press your hand on them. You got to move them around. A lot of times I need more than two arms. I want to pull somebody's hips back, drive their hips forward, grab their right arm, lag the club back, drive the arm in, and try to get them through the ball. I mean, I'd be better if I was an octopus. Then I could probably do more stuff. But I find that to be the most effective thing when people say, "Oh, I felt that." Is that what it feels like? Something as simple as the grip. I'll put my right hand on top of somebody's left hand, and I'm just holding it like I would normally hold it, and they're shaking their hand like, "What are you doing? You're hurting my thumb." So, right. So they're like, "I thought you were supposed to hold it like a bird or whatever, right? I thought you were supposed to hold it as light as you could." So I'm like, well, how hard can you swing holding it lightly and not have it come apart? So I'll do a little demonstration of maybe pounding at a steak or something. And because people equate a firm grip with frozen wrists and arms and tension and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, you better hold it firm enough to control the club in your hands.
Sure, the pounding of the steak is a great example because...
well, your wrists are moving.
Yeah, I mean, everything is free, but you're still gripping that pretty good.
And the tighter and the faster you want to pound that steak in, the harder you have to hold the club. Yeah. Which is counterintuitive to a lot of people.
Sure. And it's because when they get... I think what the problem is they don't get the tension in the right spot.
Exactly.
They get the when they try to grip too tight, then they get all this tension in their forearms up into their shoulders, as opposed to you and I could grip it very snugly with our fingers, and there's hardly any tension in our forearm and our shoulders.
Yeah, in fact, I've found that people that hold the club extremely loosely, especially when the right hand is slipping around on the left, will not cock their wrists. They'll have a tendency to try to control the club by not cocking their wrists. And you would think it would be the opposite, but it isn't. A light grip would be, I'll cock the club. But if you cock the club with your grip coming apart, it just comes apart. You don't know where the face is anymore. So when you hold it tighter, it doesn't freeze your wrists. So when people learn how to cock their wrists with that kind of extensor action and pulling the club back, when you get that feeling of the correct pressure points, then that opens up a whole new avenue for people to be able to swing with more aggressiveness.
Sure.
And
absolutely. Now, if there was a book, and we talked about some books there, if there was a book that you would recommend to the listening audience that you think would help them with their game, what book would that be?
There's a bunch of neat books. Mentally, if you ever read Arnold Haltane's book, The Mystery of Golf, he wrote this book in like 1909. Some of the most, the descriptions he makes of playing golf and how you react to it. That's extremely good. I always liked Percy Boomer's book on learning golf. Of course, Hogan's book, Power Golf, greatest pictures of a golf swing ever shot, period. Like, you'll never see better swings, better pictures of a swing than in that book. Text isn't the greatest. Some of the things he says in there are kind of odd, and then, of course, The 5 Lessons, a great book. So when I was growing up, after that, I remember Nick Faldo had a good book. I can't remember if it was a Ledbetter with Faldo or just a pretty basic book talking about swing positions and what he wanted to do with the swing. There's so many. It's kind of fun to peruse through them. I wouldn't say there's one that's going to give you everything, but it's just like any other subject. If you're interested in the subject, you would just do a wide range of reading and sort of see what you get, and take what you like. I'm friends with Bobby. I mean, you're the Impact Zone guy. We actually were teammates in the U.S.-Japan matches in 1979. We were paired. We're a two-man team playing the Japanese. So I played some with Bobby. That's back. He was 18. He was one of the best players in the world at 18 years old. I remember he shot 66 in a practice round at the course. We set the course record in the course we were playing. So no, Bobby's idea of, impact and his knowledge of the golfing machine, which is another book that is absolutely essential. Hard to get through, it's
hard.
Not easily understood for the average guy, but there's a lot you can get out of it, for sure. So a lot of great stuff. I saw Ben Doyle back in the early 90s. A couple of my crazy golfing friends were going to go out to see him, and they said, "You got to come with us and chaperone." So I got to know Ben. He was a great guy. And just about every teacher of note's come up with some kind of book, and there's always some good things involved in those. So I'd say for anybody, it's and now you have the internet, so you've got
there's all kinds of information out there to pick and choose from.
Yeah, so I started putting stuff on YouTube back in probably 8 years ago, and then we started my website about a year after that, and we've had a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun with it. So I do online lessons, and I post a lot of them on the website. So people find it very interesting to watch a lesson actually given with the lines and a voiceover, and they like that. And then if the player comes back after that, you can actually start to side by side and see progress even without face-to-face lessons. Very interesting stuff.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think that more golfers should take advantage of online stuff. Online lessons corresponding with instructors, because it gives them the opportunity to maybe work with some instructors that are way, way far away from them.
Yeah.
I mean, I really learned some great stuff from them.
I'd say I've probably given online lessons to every continent in the world. I mean, there's no geographical limitation. You just send them over. Guys from Australia. I gave a guy from India a lesson. Sweden, everywhere. It's pretty neat. It's it's pretty neat. Got a nice following of guys over in Europe, Ireland, Scotland, England, and it's fun.
Yeah, it's the great thing about technology is it brings the world closer together, and
Yeah.
and that's what I love about being able to do this show is that we can bring great minds in golf like yourself to our audience, who we have listeners all over the world. So it's a great thing. So for any of those listeners who would want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can go on my website. It's Wayne Defrancesco or WayneD.com, and you can check out the website. And there's a forum. You can add your thoughts to the forum. It's there's a lot of stuff on it. All those over the last years, and that I've done all these videos, you can find. It's endless. There's so many of them now. It's like too many of them.
Yeah, they add up, don't they?
They add up. I do 3 every week, so you add that up. There's like 700 or 800. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's always fun. Topically, it's fun, and you get the guys that win last week and see what they're doing with their swing. And I'm going to do Thomas Peters' swing, and just pulled a few off the second day of the Masters. And I mean, it's just really interesting. Like John Ram, I think you're supposed to call him now.
Mm-hmm.
But very interesting. These swings, some of these guys are homemade. I mean, homemade's a dumb word, but just let's call it unconventional.
Sure.
They just do different things. Dustin Johnson is completely different when you watch. Definitely not classic as far as positioning, but when you got the body and you can put the club on the ball, and as strong as they're getting now, it's kind of fun to watch. And then you get your classic swings. You get your Peters and your Adam Scotts, and so it's just the game is endlessly fascinating. As you saw yesterday with Sergio and Justin Rose, that was pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, totally awesome stuff. It was a great Masters this year. It's always a great Masters every year. It's
every year.
Every
Nothing like
single
that.
year, some new story unfolds. Someone gets their heart broken, and someone is rewarded, and and it can all happen in a blink of an eye. It's really it's really just amazing.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I worked with Kevin Streelman for a year and a half, and the week after we started, he won a tournament, so he got into the Masters, and he had me there for the whole week. So I got to hang out on the range, and he ended up finishing 12th, which is get you back in. And it was just fabulous. The week was just fun. It was fun, stressful, but very, very, very fun to be around on the range. Not herded around in the crowds, but sort of inside the ropes. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, look, it was great having you as a guest. Great having you on. We're just
thanks for having me.
At the end of our segment, but
Great.
Until we meet again, do your best to keep it in the short grass. That's what we like to let everybody know before we leave.
All right, Bernard. Thanks very much.
All right, take care.
All right, bye now.
Are you tired of hitting poor shots and shooting high scores? Wouldn't it be nice to make solid, consistent contact more often? Hit more fairways off the tee and more greens with your approach shots. Lower your 3 putts per round and shoot lower scores consistently. Lessons with Bernard Sheridan at Impact Zone Golf at Tiburon Golf Club in Naples is the fastest way to lower your scores and start making the game fun again. Call 239-236-5536 and schedule your lesson today. Remember, if you improve your impact, you improve your game. It's that simple.